You are watching the final recordings recovered from the Cinder House investigation. These tapes were found sealed inside a makeshift coffin beneath the floorboards of an abandoned farmhouse, documented only as personal property. They were never intended to be seen. In 2012, for graduate students specializing in parapsychology entered a farmhouse known only as the Cinder House, a remote site cursed by generations of violence, unexplained deaths, and forgotten occult practices. They were seeking definitive proof of communication with the dead. What they found was an entity known to local folklore only as the Watcher of the Ashes. The Cinder House entity did not rely on furniture levitation or simple cold spots. It relied on surgical, psychological terror. It did not want their souls, it wanted their minds. The footage documents the team's slow realization that the house was not simply haunted, but was actively manipulating their deepest trauma, making them forget who they were and forcing them to commit acts against each other. The last tape captures the culmination of a 7-day ritual, a ritual that succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. They achieved contact, but the contact did not stop when the batteries died. The Cinder House was notorious for its history. In the 1890s, the original owner burned his family alive inside the structure, claiming he was following a divine blueprint. Ever since, the house refused to die. It couldn't be torn down, and fires never consumed it fully. The name Cinder House refers not to the ash, but to the malice that remained. The team, led by Dr. Elias Vance, a highly rational academic, arrived with the stated goal of proving that residual energy could be scientifically mapped. They set up advanced magnetic sensors, EMF readers, and the array of hidden found footage cameras. They were professional, clinical, and arrogantly dismissive of local legends. The first 3 days were silent. Nothing. Just dust, cold, and the sound of the wind. The logs show the team becoming bored and skeptical. This is where the entity made its move. It didn't manifest physically. It began to rewrite their sensory input. The first anomaly began with John, the field technician. He swore the temperature in the main parlor had dropped to freezing, but the sensor reading was a normal 70 degrees. Then, the others noticed it, the smell. A persistent, strong odor of burning wood and ozone, a scent that only they could detect. The tapes document the house's attempts to isolate them. The entity began mimicking sounds, the voice of John's estranged wife, the sound of a child crying upstairs where no child existed. The key to Cinder House, Dr. Vance theorized in his private recordings, was that it did not possess objects. It possessed the perception of those inside. It forced them to question their own senses, preparing them for the central ritual. On day 4, they prepared the main ritual. Not a religious ceremony, but a scientific one. An attempt to open a communication channel using white noise, electromagnetic pulses, and a specific chant taken from ancient texts related to the house's founding. They weren't seeking a ghost. They were seeking the primal resonance of the house's agony. The ritual began at midnight on day 4. The goal was to sustain the energy channel for 6 hours. What followed is the most compelling and terrifying evidence recorded on the tapes. The moment the chanting began, the entity responded not with noise, but with absolute silence. All exterior sounds, the wind, the generator, the mice, vanished. The only sound was the white noise and the 4 beating hearts of the team. The silence was the signal. Within minutes, the entity attacked their perception of time and memory. Dr. Vance's log from that hour shows he spent 20 minutes staring at his own reflection, unable to remember his name. The tape shows the team arguing violently about events that had not yet occurred, or things they had done days ago. The house was shuffling their minds like a deck of cards. The most disturbing footage involves Sarah, the linguist. She begins to scream, pointing at the camera, claiming that the technician, Marcus, had been dead for 3 days. She describes his burial in vivid detail, and the camera briefly cuts to a shot of a shallow grave outside. Marcus is visibly present in the room, but the entity had successfully made Sarah's mind believe he was a resurrected corpse. The entity was personalizing the terror. It used John's deep-seated guilt over his failed marriage to make him believe the house was mocking him by playing his wife's voice, accusing him of treason. He tried to destroy the recording equipment, convinced they were transmitting private messages. The team descended into chaos, fighting each other instead of the force they had invited. By day 5, they could no longer trust their own tapes or their own eyes. The Cinder House entity had reached its goal. It was preparing the hosts. It made them forget their purpose, forget their identity, and forget their boundaries. The tapes show 2 of the men trying to barricade themselves in a room, but the house simply allowed the entity to use the third man, Vance, as a vessel. The possession was swift, silent, and entirely unseen until it was too late. The final tape recovered is only 15 minutes long, starting sometime on day 7. It is chaos. Only Dr. Vance and Marcus are left, trapped in the main parlor. The entity, now fully manifesting through the movements and actions of the previously possessed John, begins its final assault. Marcus, the technician, attempts to record the sounds one last time, convinced that the sound is the only remaining truth. But the entity responds by manipulating the equipment itself. The sound of the entity's laugh, captured on the tape, is suddenly reversed and then pitched so high it becomes a painful shriek. Vance, seeing his colleagues fully lost and the entity victorious, makes a final, desperate attempt to destroy the house. He uses the only remaining kerosene from the lamp, setting fire to the central staircase. This was the entity's final lesson. The Cinder House cannot be destroyed. The final 5 minutes of the tape capture the terrible irony. As the flames flicker to life, they reveal that the house has somehow shifted its geometry. The staircase no longer leads up. It now leads down, into the pitch-black space below the floorboards. Vance is seen pushing the recorder into a small, dark hole, a final attempt to preserve the evidence. The last audio segment is the most horrific. As the fire rages above, the voice of the entity, Moloch, is heard clearly, speaking not through a host, but directly from the static itself. It doesn't scream or threaten. It simply says, "Welcome home." The tape ends abruptly with the sound of a heavy wooden lid slamming shut. The evidence was sealed. The team was fully consumed. The entity was